Coming up on the Mind Caddie.
If you are an amateur club golfer that is frustrated about feeling like you're a better golfer than your scores reflect, what have you got to lose? You're not going to get worse.
Unless you pay attention to the question that you're being asked, you're not going to be able to come up with the answers.
Almost every single amateur golfer just overcomplicates the short game. They use too much loft, too much length of swing, too much speed, trying to spin it too much wrist hinge. And there's so much that can go wrong. Why are we obsessing about the stuff that we can't do and not paying attention to the stuff that we can do?
Mind Caddie.
Hello, Gary. Thanks very much for joining me again on the show.
Great to be back, Carl. Yeah, really looking forward to it. It's been a little while, isn't it? So maybe we both learned even more about ourselves and about the game.
Hopefully, yeah, that's for sure. We had a great response last time from the conversation that we had, and I know you wrote that book written the book with the great title, Beat the Golf Course, not yourself. But you were just telling me before we started that you're actually at a golf course with your other sort of media hat on. Tell us a little bit about where you're at and what you're doing out there in the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I actually just came back from San Diego on Monday, so I covered Justin Rose win in pretty impressive fashion at the Farmers, and then I'm actually coming and working in the studio covering the Phoenix event. So that will go out around the world. It's something that the PGA Tour have started doing called the World Feed. So it goes out to our international partners around the world. So my mum can listen to me and watch me do these World Feed events. So it's really fun, and it's it's a privilege to be around the best players in the world and learn from them. Being a former semi-elite player, you understand what made you good, but just to watch the elite players, just to see what they do, how they go about their business, and what they do away from the course, I think more than anything is the illuminating thing that you can really learn from. And I was thinking about it actually. I was wondering kind of what we would talk about, and just from my time spent playing on tour and then covering the PGA Tour, it's fascinating. It's almost like it's smoke and mirrors, where we get distracted. It's like a good magician who, we get focused on his hands and we don't see something else happening, and that pocket watch appears from behind your left ear or whatever. So we get distracted, don't we, by marveling at Rory McIlroy's incredible swing, or how far the players hit it, or their deft touch around the greens. And because we're so focused on that as fans in particular, we don't actually really pay attention to the stuff that's pertinent to us. We can't swing it like Rory. We don't spend 2 hours in the gym every day. We don't have this incredible natural born talent. And we're trying to break down his swing piece by piece to figure out what makes Rory so good. Well, it's pointless because you can't replicate that. But what we can do is learn from how these players approach the game, and watch them prepare, and watch them go through the process of making a decision, and all of the things that you can actually pay attention to as an amateur golfer, as a club golfer who has a job and a wife and kids, or a husband and kids and dogs and responsibilities. Yeah. Exactly. You don't have any time to practice, basically. You don't have the time to do all this functional training in the gym like they do. You don't have nutritionists. You don't have psychologists. You don't have all of these things that they have around them, the team that they have around them. And so why are we obsessing about the stuff that we can't do and not paying attention to the stuff that we can do? And that was that moment where it all brought into focus of why I became the player that I became, that got the most out of my talent. And what you talk about in all those things, in a similar vein of, hey, these are the things that actually can help you. You're getting distracted by the other things.
What would you say for any folks listening, Gary? What would be the sort of top of the list for you in terms of obvious wins that people could look at as we're going into the season, hopefully soon in the next few weeks, certainly in Western Europe?
Well, I mean, the big thing to me is just a plan. What are you trying to do on this shot? I took a picture. I haven't put it on Instagram yet, and it's just a caddy and a player talking, discussing. And it's a still shot of two people, an elite athlete and an elite caddy, trying to figure out what you're going to do here. And the best players in the world can hit any shot in the world. And yet they're not going to hit that shot until they actually know what they're trying to do and discuss what they're trying to do. You know, obviously they can land the ball in a small area. A normal club golfer, a 15 handicapper, can't land it in a small area. But because there's no focus on where you're actually trying to land it, or what which direction it's going to curve, because that's what we do most of the time, we just sort of stand up to it and hit it and hope for the best. And so if the best players in the world have to kind of collect their thoughts and get a really clear game plan, and they can do whatever they want with the golf ball, I think that's something that we can really learn as club golfers to, don't just stand up there and hit it and hope for the best. Actually, even if you're a 15, 20 handicap and you don't really, you're not really sure that you're going to hit a solid shot, or you're not really sure where the ball's going to go, you at least direct your brain and your mind and your body to try and achieve something. And I think if you just did that, if you were committed to every shot of having a plan every shot, I think you'd be better without, swing's not going to change. You're not going to reimagine your swing, and you're not going to change mechanically what you do, because you don't have the time and the reps to be able to do it. I moved my hand position one winter about 2 inches. It took me 4 months of hitting balls every day with a coach on video. It took me another month or two to trust that on the golf course. And then it took me another month to trust it under tournament conditions.
Yeah.
So I've hit thousands and thousands and thousands of balls in the course of 4 or 5 months. And I still wasn't sure it would happen, because, most of the time you're going to kind of revert back to what you've always done. And so, that's not that for 99.9% of the golfing population, we're not going to hit thousands of balls with a coach on video. So instead of us wasting our time and efforts trying to completely reimagine how we swing a golf club, you can spend a portion of that time in the simple stuff, the low-hanging fruit, learning how to read greens, learning how to read a lie, learning how to commit to a shot, learning how to pick your way around a golf course, learning how to be aware of yourself, and learning to be aware of, when you start to lose focus, learning a routine, all of those things, man, you could do in the privacy of your own home for a lot of it, and then just pay attention on the golf course. The thing that really stands out to me with most club golfers is the ball's sitting around the green. They pick the club and they try and fit the club to the lie.
Right.
The pros will go over to the lie without the golf club, look at the lie, and then in their mind eliminate a couple of choices, which leaves them one or maybe two choices to hit that golf shot, and then they will fit everything to what the lie has given them. Just a simple reset of how you go about short game shots would reap huge dividends, because most people pick the wrong shot with the wrong club at the wrong time and wonder why they miss the green with their approach and then miss the green with their chip.
It's really interesting, Gary. It kind of reinforces something that I've perhaps suggested over the last few years, that if you see the golf course, every time that you go and play golf, the golf course will offer up to you, depending on your ability, it'll offer you between 60 and 90 different puzzles to solve. Every one of those puzzles is completely unique, completely separate. And just like if you were trying to do a crossword puzzle, or you're trying to answer a question in a quiz, unless you pay attention to the question that you're being asked, you're not going to be able to come up with the answers. And I think that's what you're reinforcing there, isn't it?
Yeah.
That yes, we can spend so much time looking at golf swings and analysing it to death, and that has its part to play, obviously. But the real opportunity perhaps this season for everybody listening is, could you get really good at answering the individual question that you're asked on each shot? And within that, then, in terms of execution, I think you've touched on this before in our conversations, you actually don't need that many shots, do you, to be pretty effective on the golf course?
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I one of the weird things is I've actually become a better chipper without practice than when I was chipping for hours a day, for days a week, when I was playing for a living. And I was a very good chipper, but I got away just purely through repetition and practice and hard work, and was a good chipper, good enough to be a world-class chipper. Certainly not in the Mickelson or Jordan Spieth standard, but good enough
Very
to
competent.
have a PGA. Exactly, good enough to have a PGA Tour card and not stand out as having a weak short game. And when I quit golf because of my injury, when I started playing again, my coach had always said, "Hey, your swing's fine. Your swing is on plane. It's always got a quiet club face. You're always going to hit it well." And it was exactly true. And I took off, basically years from the game, and then came back, and the ball striking was still there, but my chipping was awful, and it was embarrassing because the technique that I had conned myself or kidded myself was a great technique wasn't actually a great technique. It was just loads of repetition made it work. And so coming back after not playing for years, it didn't work. And, I started having to revert to a hybrid around the green, just to make sure I didn't duff it or fat it or thin it. And then all of a sudden I became really adept with the hybrid, and it became an offensive weapon rather than just trying to get it on the green. And so I talked a lot with Colin Swatton and Jason Day about their chipping technique, because it seemed to me like that was the simplest method with the least moving parts, and the least amount of potentially timing and stuff that needed to happen. Minimal wrist break, more in the body, less in the hands, weight forwards, all of those things. And as a result of that, I now use one technique, and I just changed the ball position and the hand position a bit at address. And all of a sudden I can hit literally every single shot I need, whether it's a hybrid along the ground or a lob wedge up and over a bunker. It's the same technique, but with the hybrid on the ground, it's on my right instep with the hands forward and the club low to the ground, weight forwards. Over a bunker, it's ball up, hands a little bit back behind the ball, but weight forwards, keeping the club low to the ground and using the loft of the club and the bounce of the club. So now I have a technique that I've got full trust in, that I don't have to practice with. All I got to do is fit the correct setup and the correct club to the challenge that presents the shot. Exactly, yeah. And it's been so freeing. It's been brilliant, and I love doing short game clinics, because I think almost every single amateur golfer just overcomplicates the short game. They use too much loft, too much length of swing, too much speed, trying to spin it too much wrist hinge, and there's so much that can go wrong. So one of those variables, which I would call it, trying to pitch it too far onto the green, all of those things are variables. And the more variables there are, if something of those goes wrong, you're not going to perform very well. So I'm trying to reduce all the variables and make it as simple a shot as possible, but then also use expectations to say, hey, if I'm on a downslope in a bad lie over a bunker, well, my expectations are not to try and stiff this, it's to try and hit it solidly to a spot that I can two-putt from. And even as a good player, a very good player, I understand my limitations. Now, maybe Mickelson or maybe Jordan Spieth would try and hit a miracle hero shot, but what they're also going to do, they're going to risk making double bogey to make a par. And I just know my limitations. So I'm able to actually relate now in my coaching to the normal regular golfer, because I don't practice. So I've had to find a way to reimagine the game where I make smart decisions. I commit to the best routine that I possibly can, pick the smartest shot, and accept the consequences of not practicing all the time. And it's I really, really enjoy the game now.
Just go into a bit more detail then, Gary, on that technique. Explain it from scratch to somebody listening to it for the first time. What's the sort of mechanics that you've settled on?
Yeah, it's just when we watch, think about Jason Day or Steve Stricker, maybe Bryson DeChambeau, the arms basically stay the similar length, and it's more of a body motion rather than a hands motion. And what happens is, with the weight a little bit forwards, the low point is in the same spot every time, because you're not changing it with wrist hinge.
Right. So there's very little wrist set in. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, obviously, the longer the swing, it's going to set a little bit with the weight of the club.
Yeah.
But my goal is to pitch it as close as possible to me, where it's going to hopefully land on the green. If not, if it's, you pick the landing area, is it a relatively flat landing area? If it's short of the green, so there's some certainty what the ball's going to do. So I'm making a smart decision before I hit the ball. And when in my clinics, I say, I pick a person and say, hey, who's the person that you love the most? Your kids, your spouse. And I said, if your life depended on it, would this be a better, and you have to catch this golf ball. Would this, if your life depended on it, work well if I just toss it underhand from about 4 feet away, or then I'd run backwards and throw it overhand from about 10 yards away? Well, it's obviously going to be way easier to hit my hands from 4 feet away, just tossing it gently underhand. So that's kind of the chipping thought process of, if I can land it a little bit close to me with less length, less speed, less spin, there's way more certainty to it. And so when we see club golfers, most of the time they're just trying to land the ball way too far. There's way too much length of swing. There's way too much speed. They're trying to spin it for some reason. And it just overcomplicates what should be a much more simple motion.
I think that's fantastic. Just go into some detail about the hybrid, Gary, because I think that's a huge opportunity. I spend a little bit of time with various clients, players at links courses, the Lythams and places like that, and it's amazing on those courses where you can get some tight lies around the greens, and actually playing some pitch shots is fairly high tariff dive. But get the hybrid out, you can become really, really effective in the summertime with the hybrid, can't you? On for instance, a links course.
Exactly. And it's just learning the technique. If you learn the technique where you keep the club low to the ground, you have the hands forward, the ball back, and you don't use wrist hinge. So that's what keeps the club low to the ground. You're basically hitting the putt, but you've got, let's say, 20 degrees of loft on the hybrid. So it gets the ball up on top of the surface.
Yeah.
When we got a putter with 3 degrees of loft, we kind of drive it down into the surface, especially if we're going up a hill or up a valley or whatever else it is. It gets jumping and we lose the control of the ball. The hybrid gets it up on top. And, in America, they have a lot of those shaved areas where it runs off and down to a tightly mown area. The green's 4 feet above you, and you're standing up there with a lob wedge, or if you're trying to pitch it into the hill, because it's so grainy around the greens and you pitch it into the hill, you never really know what the ball's going to do, because it's a lot different to links golf, where that ball's going to move forwards. And so the hybrid just keeps it on the surface and runs it up the hill. And it's just then a matter of, once you've got the technique, then it's just a matter of just hitting enough balls just to learn how far you got to move the club to move the ball a certain distance. And what happens, most people have way too long of a swing. They have like a miniature swing with their hybrid with loads of wrist hinge. The club gets way up in the air through the ball and after the ball, and they miss hit it all the time. And so they take this massive swing, the ball doesn't go very far. When they get the right technique and it's a more compact, low swing, the ball comes out the middle of the hybrid and it goes forever. And you don't realize how far it goes with a decent contact in the ball. And so that's just that little bit of practice. But I can almost guarantee you could spend half an hour learning the technique and then just putting it into practice, and you will want to find an opportunity to use that hybrid rather than having that's the last resort. And that's what I find. I mean, I can't wait to get it out. Yeah. And it's like people are looking at you thinking, oh, this guy used to play on two, he's got a hybrid in his hand. And then you knock it to 2 feet, you tap it in, and you look at it on the shoulders and say, well, why would you use a lob wedge from there? And that's the fun. That's the fun part of it, is to help people reimagine how they look at the game and how they look at choices of shots.
And as you're saying, though, with that technique, you are, whether it's with the hybrid or the wedges, with that thing, you are starting to control your trajectory, aren't you? And as you control your trajectory, your brain can start to picture where you want it to land, etc. So it feeds into then a good routine of creating each individual shot.
Yeah. When I'm making a practice swing, again, the reason I was successful in my own way was my commitment to my routine, my visualization skills, my commitment skills. So when I've got that hybrid out, I can feel the ball coming off the club head in the practice swing, and I can imagine it running over the surface, and I can see it jumping, then I can see it kind of hugging the ground onto the green. That doesn't take that doesn't take physical skill or physical talent. It just takes the ability to just imagine. And then that picture is matched when I actually hit the shot. But the only reason it's matched is because I've seen it. And so that's where, even though I don't practice, I still have that ability to visualize and see the shot as vividly as possible. And it's fascinating when you're coaching, you know, especially teenagers, you know, they've never done that. And they don't like the commitment process because it takes too long, and, you know, they don't want to hold up play. And, you know, I'm taken through a thought process, and they're kind of looking over their shoulders because, you know, we're standing there not doing anything for 20 seconds. And then we got to do a practice swing, and we got to do, and they get antsy, and then they hit a bad shot because they're panicked. And I said, look, this is all a learned skill, right? The good news is you can learn this away from the course. You can do this at home. But I played for 40 years now, and I can basically make a decision in 2 or 3 seconds of picking the right shot with the right club and knowing what I'm going to do. Now, for you, you've got to think of this consciously. It might take us 30 seconds to kind of go through questions and answers and eliminate things, and then you learn why, and then you got to commit to a shot that maybe you don't really want to hit because you've never hit it before. And then you hit a bad shot, then you got doubt in your mind, but then we go on to the next one, we do it all over again. I said, you know, maybe in 2 months it takes 20 seconds. And then maybe in 2 more months it takes 10 seconds. And then maybe 6 months later it takes 5 seconds. And now you've got a very clear picture very quickly because you know what it is you're looking for. Right now you don't know what you're looking for, and that's why it takes so long.
And you know, the more you look at things like this, Gary, the more you look at these options, as you say, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of skill to actually develop these skills, does it? We're not talking about full body motion and having to change your fundamental movement patterns and things like that. It is an opportunity, literally, for everybody to get really sharp around the greens. And I think the other point that you made earlier, which was brilliant as well, if you miss a green, I think most people's first question is, how can I make par? Sometimes the question needs to be, how can I make bogey, doesn't it? And there's nothing wrong in asking that question.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I look at it, I try and look at it as logically as possible. Okay. The average handicap I know is about 15, which means the average player will hit 3 to 6 greens in regulation, maybe.
Yeah.
So you've got an awful lot of opportunities to chip.
Yeah.
Most people never take a chipping lesson. Most people don't know how to chip. They just accept that, okay, well, I'm just gonna miss the green. I'm gonna chip it, and hopefully I'll get up and down. But there's no commitment. There's no thought process. There's just, this is my chipping club. And sometimes I duff it. Sometimes I fin it. Sometimes I get it close, and it's kind of luck. Because it's 100% based on timing and a little bit of luck. And so when you boil down your round of, okay, if I'm going to miss the green, you know, on average 13, 14 times around, why would I not get good at chipping and turn a lot of those doubles where I duff it into the bunker into bogeys? We don't have to turn a double into a par, but if we can turn a double into a bogey and turn the odd bogey into the odd par, you know, for very little bit of work and learning, and, you know, maybe it takes a lesson or two, you know, I think you can take your handicap down from an average golfer, you know, 2 or 3 shots, 4 shots, very, very quickly with very little pain. Now, if you're trying to drive your way to reducing your handicap by 3 or 4 shots, you've got a club that's moving goodness knows how many feet. The club head is 4 feet away from you. You're trying to hit this little ball, and you're sitting there at your desk, you know, 9 hours a day. Your body's all shot to pieces because it doesn't work properly. It's not functional. And you're trying to swing this club as hard as you can and expecting that you're going to hit the ball straight. It ain't going to happen. Now, it could take you month upon month upon month of really working and practicing and taking lessons and then practicing more to go from hitting 5 fairways around to 7 fairways around. Now, if you're still thinking just as badly and your short game is just as bad, you're still going to shoot the same
Story's not
scores.
going to change, is it?
Yeah, you probably gone and bought a 500-pound driver, and you've taken hundreds of dollars of lessons or hundreds of pounds of lessons, and you're still the same player. You still shoot the same. It's just not good use of resources. Now, I think a commitment to the simple stuff of learning how to chip decently, learning how to make good decisions, learning how to read greens, learning how pace is the most important thing on putts, learning expectations of what you should expect to do from every distance. I think if you committed to that for a year, I think you would permanently become a lower handicap golfer, not just a freaky couple of months where then your handicap bounces back to what it's always been. It will reduce for the rest of your golfing career, because it's always going to be part of your challenge every single round that you play.
You mentioned there another, I think, very low-hanging fruit for most golfers, which would be on the greens. Everybody tends to focus on getting the start lines right and all the rest of it, and stroke, which is obviously got a part to play. We're not saying line isn't important, but the big offering that the game gives us to get better at is pace control. What would be some suggestions that you would make, Gary, for people to, again, start out this season, have this overarching goal of getting better at pace control on the greens? What would be a route that you would suggest people go down?
I think number one is your goal is to hit it the right pace. I think number one, that's the main goal. When you think about it, so the best players in the world are more likely to miss the make from about 8 feet. Now, these guys are the most unbelievable athletes you've ever seen. They practice hours upon hour a day, every single day of their lives. They've done it for decades. And from 8 feet, they basically miss more than they make, maybe 9 feet.
On the best surfaces on Earth.
On the best surfaces on Earth. And so a person who plays once every 2 weeks, who works for a living, who never hits any practice putts, who doesn't have a great stroke, where should that number be from them? 4 feet? I mean, so basically outside 4 feet, you've got a much better chance of missing the making. And so if your goal is to hit it the right distance and let the hole get in the way, that's a far better approach than trying to make 8-footers or 15-footers or 20-footers. The stats will show you're more likely, as a mid-range handicap, to 3-putt from 20 feet rather than 1-putt. So if we're standing over there trying to make a 20-footer, you're just making it more likely that you're going to 3-putt. If you're standing over a 20-footer trying to roll this the right distance, and if you misread it or misstart it on the wrong line by 2 feet, you're still going to tap it in for your putt or your 2-putt. If we can think about it that way, I'm always really intrigued about these high achiever and business people I play with. That they just make decisions that you would say, boy, if you were making decisions like this in your business, you wouldn't have a business anymore, because it just doesn't. It's not logical that you're trying to do something that you're not capable of doing. The best players in the world aren't capable of doing, and yet in your mind you think you should be achieving that. So I work, if I do practice, I very rarely practice, but if I do practice, it's all pace, of just pace drills. I do ladder drills of, I'll have a tee 15 feet in front of another tee and then another 15 feet, and from the first tee I'll try and roll the ball just past the second tee, and then a second ball just past that ball, pick up the ball that was the furthest back and try and try and putt it just past that ball that I've just putted, and see how many I could fit into that 15-foot gap. When I was playing for a living, I could do about 12 uphill and about 10 downhill. Like if you could start, just looking to do 6 uphill and four downhill, I think would be a really good start. And then maybe get used to achieving that and then try and do 7 and 5. But what I notice is most people's swings don't relate to the putt that they're trying to hit. So they have this tiny backswing and this massive follow through to hit it on lag putts, and they wonder why one will go 10 feet past, one will come up 6 feet short, and then the third one will go right next to the hole. It's because it's just luck. Again, it's 100% on timing, and when you don't practice, your timing's never going to be very consistent. So what I like to do is I work with a metronome, and that's what I did when I was on tour. And unfortunately, I wasn't educated enough to have the right metronome setting. So I was a decent putter, but just a bit streaky. I wasn't a consistent putter. But it was because my metronome setting was off. So I was talking to a bloke called Mike Shannon, who teaches a lot of tour players, very good putting coaches over the TPC Sawgrass. And I was asking, hey, what's the kind of the tour average setting for a metronome? He said 76 beats per minute. And it blew my mind because I was setting mine at 65. I was thinking of a nice slow back, slow through, and bigger swing and everything. And it completely transformed my putting recently, where I now feel much better contact, much more consistent pace, much more consistent center strikes, because I was kind of with a slower beat. I was kind of decelerating, hitting a little bit out the toe, a little bit high a little bit low on the face. And this is just something really simple. And then what you'll find is your length of your swing will start to lengthen because of the metronome. You can't go short, long, because the metronome beat rhythm will be all off. But I've had some incredible success with 3 or 4 players with terrible lag putters. And all of a sudden, we just committed to the metronome to set it at 76. And now all of a sudden, they have become they've gone from bad putters to not just decent putters, they've become good putters. And when you think about a mid-range handicap, they're not going to hit many shots on the green inside 20 feet. So they're basically, if they hit a green regulation, it's going to be 30, 40, 50 feet away.
Yeah.
And so, they get frustrated when they hit a green regulation and 3-putt it. So now they're 2-putting more of the greens in regulation, and they're holding more of the short putts. They're holding more of the chips because we worked on chipping, and we've had some really good success bringing their handicaps down. And as I said, permanently, that's what we're looking for.
Back in your playing days, Gary, I know you touched on this when we had the last conversation, but let's kind of revisit it somewhat. What was it that kind of inspired you or got you thinking more about looking at the mental game as an option to get better, as opposed to the technical route?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 5'8", I'm 160. I hit the ball very, very straight. I didn't hit it very long. And so I was trying to figure out where is my competitive advantage. So, I mean, I'm not going to hit many more fairways. I would hit 10 fairways, or average 10 fairways. I was, top when I was my rookie year, and so I think I was 5th in driving accuracy. So I'm not going to hit any straighter, basically. I hit it average, I don't know, 280 yards in the majority of the fairways. Now, I could have reinvented how far I hit it. We've seen pros do that. Stephen Yeager would be an example. He put on 15 yards and transformed his game. But Stephen, was early 30s. I was 40. And so I couldn't risk trying to change the way I swung and could completely lose it. And at 40, that's it, you're done.
Yeah.
So I had to maintain my swing with the speed that I felt comfortable swinging it. So I knew that speed training wasn't an option. It could work out really well, but there's also the chance it couldn't work out really well. And I didn't have the exemptions and the breathing space to say I can afford an awful year because I've got plenty of years to play on the tour.
Yeah.
So there was really only one sort of frontier that was there that I had touched on, but I hadn't thrown myself into. And I'm a clever guy, and I'm an inquisitive guy. I'm a curious guy, and I knew that I didn't really sense that my competition was going fully into the mental side of the game. They were all doing what everyone does. They read the old Bob Rotella book, and they say, "Okay, I'm doing the mental stuff." And Bob Rotella is a great golf psychologist if you want to spend the money and spend the weekend with him, and you get a real hands-on experience. I didn't have the money to do that. And the books were great, but they were just anecdotes. And, I was thinking, man, that doesn't really relate to me. They're cool stories. I see the validity in it, but I need something that's more tailored to me and to my individual challenges, my individual personality, everything comes with it. And so I figured that I've got to find the right mix for psychology. And I was fortunate, a lovely old guy called Dave Reagan, he played on the PGA Tour in the 60s and 70s. I think he played Ryder Cup. He finished runner-up to Jack Nicklaus in the PGA Championship. Gave me a big folder of papers probably 10 years before I ever threw myself into it. And I was in my late 20s, and I looked at it, and it looked interesting, but it looked like a lot of hard work. And so I just chucked it in a box. And then I moved to Dallas for a couple of years, and my coach there, his best friend, was an eminent clinical psychologist that had presented around the world. He presented to the Moscow or the Russian Institute of Science in communist times. He was that highly regarded.
Right.
And he gave me a bunch of audio tapes with relaxation techniques and visualization techniques, autogenics, subliminals. Same thing. I didn't really understand the validity of it. And so I just chucked it in that same box. And then after being successful on mini tours, but keep failing at second stage of qualifying school, I knew I needed to make that pivot. And so I was always wanting to know what that pivot was. Once I found the psychology as the thing that I needed to do, I kind of went back and said, man, I got a box full of this stuff that, and I haven't even looked into it. And so I just started reading the papers, and the papers spoke to me that, hey, that's me. I do that. Oh, wow, there's a plan at the end for this. This is what you need to do. Connected to that was a psychological profile you could take that would help kind of tailor it even more. And so then I had a game plan. I had an absolute plan where I knew that this was going to make me a better player. And this was going to be something that most of the rest of the tour players and the mini tour players and the Corn Ferry Tour players were not doing.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden I was competing on, a pretty even keel against them without this as my competitive advantage. Now imagine what I could achieve with this sort of superpower that no one else has. And that's where the career just took off, from skating through qualifying school to winning on the Corn Ferry Tour a couple of times, becoming, I think, the oldest true rookie in the history of the tour, all because of this pivot to the mental side of the game. And it was so freeing, and it was almost like you'd have a little chuckle sometimes, because you'd see someone way more talented than you that had no way to control themselves, and they didn't have focus, and they got down on themselves when they hit a bad shot. And I knew, man, I'm going to beat this guy who's way better than me. This is really cool. Yeah. And so it felt almost like a cloak of invincibility that, I had this something special that if I could stay fit, and if I could, maintain my intensity and my goal setting and everything that came with it, man, I was going to be successful. And I maintained most of that until my knee got blown out my second year on tour. So that was the pivot. There was one really cool thing that, so with these subliminal tapes, the guy, whose name is Art Pfeiffer, said, hey, play this one first. It's positive thinking. And it was in the days of Walkman. It was an audio cassette. And he said, go hit 5 15-foot putts just normally. And, I was kind of a die putter. And, I hit 5 15-footers, one went in, one kind of crept a foot past, a couple kind of just went up to the front edge, one came up short. He said, now put on the audio tape. And so I putted with it. Everything went 3 feet past. Now, I wasn't trying to hit it 3 feet past, but the power of the subliminal messages of positive thinking just translated to, a little bit more aggression and a little bit more positive thinking of, instead of just trying to weasel it up there and hope it went in, I was doing it with a purpose. And it was fascinating. That was that moment when I thought, okay, there's a lot to this, because something's changed and I haven't tried to change it. It's just changing naturally. And so that's why I threw myself into basically, a couple of hours a day working on, visualization techniques, relaxation techniques, the subliminal stuff, everything that came with it. And then sort of focusing in on my weaknesses from the psychological profile. There's a lady called Deborah Graham who did a lot of research before she ever published anything, from players on the Ladies Tour, Champions Tour, Corn Ferry Tour, PGA Tour, and identified the 8 traits of champion golfers that the successful ones had and the non-successful ones lacked.
Yeah. And I think the great message in that is that, as you said, not everybody's got the time or the wherewithal to hit millions of balls and make swing changes, but I think everybody could at least explore the mental side of the game, couldn't be a little bit more. And I think you're a good example of you've gone from having information to actually acting on that information and doing something about it, as opposed to just thinking about it, because it does need working on, doesn't it? It's a skill to develop.
Exactly. But it's a skill to develop that is easier to develop than trying to learn from going from hitting a golf ball where you come from 15 degrees from the outside of the ball and trying to hit it solid. It's way easier to learn these techniques than trying to make that club come from a degree from the inside, with minimal practice. And so, what I like is, I like to, in effect, be an example of everything that you talk about in real life, of being a moderately successful mini tour player to being a rookie on the PGA Tour at 40, which there's no business for me at that age and that skill set.
You shouldn't have been there, really, should you?
No, exactly. Yeah. And it was, it was a great feeling of being that typical English underdog, undersized, undertalented. But it was great to get to put my game up against the best players in the world who had had unlimited resources all their career. And I could play on an even keel. My mum and dad came to see me. The first time they ever came to see me on the tour, we played at Quail Hollow. And I beat Tiger, Rory, and Phil.
Wow.
And I'm just, we're sitting there having a drink afterwards. And I think my dad said, "Oh, that was cool. You beat Rory, Tiger, and Phil. Wow, that's amazing." I said, "Yeah, not bad for a little guy, is it, from Croydon or Carshalton?" But yeah, it's validation. And what you want to see, you want to take it from the theory to the practice. And I think, obviously, at my level, it was proven. But I think, if you are an amateur club golfer that is frustrated about feeling like you're a better golfer than your scores reflect, what have you got to lose? You're not going to get worse. What you're doing is you're just controlling everything that you can control that's in your power. Good decision making, a good plan, everything that comes with the psychological and the preparation side of the game. And at the end of the day, we want to feel like, I did everything I could do to do the best I could do. And you're swinging a golf club at 100 miles an hour and hoping you're going to hit it straight with not very good technique it's really, really tough to do, especially when we're bombarded with social media saying, man, you just got to hit it as close to the green as possible. You got to swing it as hard as possible. If you don't know where the club's coming from or you don't know where the face is, I can guarantee you that ain't a real good way of doing it.
Yeah.
I always talk about, my typical student is a 15 handicap, doesn't have a very good fit, functional body. He's basically a 1994 Fiesta. And, you want to rev that thing at about 1,500 RPMs. And if you do that, you're probably going to get to your destination. If you drive that thing at 5,000 RPMs, the engine may blow up by the end of the road. Rory McIlroy is a Bentley. He can rev that thing at 6,000 RPMs because he's functional, he's got a great swing, he's got incredible talent, and he can hit as hard as he wants. And that Bentley is going to perform.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is we want to take that 1994 Fiesta and make it a 2005 Toyota Camry, where maybe we can rev it at 2,500 RPMs because we've got a little bit better technique, we've got a lot better thought process, and maybe we can be a little bit more aggressive with how we swing the club because it's a more functional swing. Our body maybe works a little bit better. Our thought process is 100 times better. So now we can go about, being a little bit, set our goals a little bit higher because we got more tools in the toolkit to be more successful.
And I think for a lot of folks listening who are perhaps, in the 50s or 60s and maybe thinking about dipping the toe back into competitive golf, there is these days, Gary, a wonderful opportunity in your 50s and 60s, all the places that you can play, the experiences that you can have. And I don't see anything wrong on setting out on this path of self-mastery. You'll never do it. None of us ever will. None of us are going to master this game, but to actually set on that path and say, what could I be capable of? What could I actually achieve? But as you've highlighted today, you have to really be aware of focusing on the right stuff rather than being media-led into what everybody's working on.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the media-led stuff that we just... you'll watch 5 different videos and you'll hear 5 different things. And now you're really confused. Now, what happens? You try something and you figure that doesn't work. So you'll try the next thing because you watch the video on that. That doesn't work. So then you're just grasping at straws as opposed to, learning what would be a really good path for you for the combination of the time that you have to devote to it, for what your body can do, and what your commitment is to being patient enough to give it time to work. Just something simple like when you get on a green, and if you've committed to saying, "Hey, look, for the next month, every putt I hit, all I'm going to try and do is hit it the right distance, whether it's from 3 feet or 50 feet."
Yeah.
And if you did one extra thing of going down the side of the putt and looking at the topography of the green to see how much it goes downhill, how much it goes uphill, that will help you immensely, because you now get a true picture of what is between your ball and that hole.
Yeah.
If you did that for a month, your pace control will be better. If you work with a metronome for a month, your pace control will be better. And that is, that's like a really simple thing that doesn't take any great talent. It just takes a little bit of commitment and a little bit of patience and a little bit of time management of, you don't want to hold up play while you're walking to the green, go look at that side view.
Yeah.
And then, when you're at home, maybe just put the metronome on for a couple of minutes a day and just hear that internal beat in your head. So then when you get to the course and you're on the course, you kind of can hear that beat, and then your stroke will reflect that beat, those beats per minute. I guarantee you'll become a better putter. I guarantee you, if you have a more simple chipping technique and you have a more simple approach to pick the right shot at the right time with the right club and the right setup, you will become a better chipper.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, we've taken two parts of the game, and without having to reinvent too much, we just kind of put the focus on the right things. And any kind of time you have to practice, maybe with the chipping, maybe you chip for an hour a week and just learn a more consistent technique and experiment with clubs out of certain lies to know what to look for with the lies. You will become a better chipper. It's fascinating. Listen to people that you've taught, and they'll come back. I apologize for my Apple Watch misbehaving here. I love it when they come back to me and we'll have a lesson and say, "Let me tell you about the shot I hit on 15 last week. I was in the spot below the green, and I'd always pick out the lob wedge, and I'd always try to hit it up in the air. And I grabbed the club, and I thought, no, this is what we worked on last time. Let me look at this lie." I put the club back in the bag, and I saw the lie, the ball was sitting down, and I knew the risk was so high to get anything with lofter, and I picked that hybrid, and I hit that shot. And man, I didn't get up and down, but God, I hit a really good shot up there to 7 feet, and narrowly missed the putt. But God, that gave me so much excitement to learn a different shot and I actually put it into practice, because I caught myself being aware of just mindlessly grabbing the club that I've always grabbed. And that's a really powerful thing for a coach to hear that.
Yeah. Gary, absolutely brilliant. Tell people about the book and where they can get hold of you, etc.
Beat the Course, Not Yourself is the book. It's available on Amazon. We've actually sold, it's been brilliant to sell around the world, all over the world. We've had people buy it. But it's just a simple guide. It's a story. So it's not high-end academic writing. It's the story through the eyes of a 15-year-old competitive golfer, and the lessons he learns from not being able to perform when he needs to perform. Learns a better way of preparing, a better way of thinking, a better way of distracting yourself in between shots, a routine, all of these things that we talk about. And then we see it culminate in a great tournament at the end. It's a great read, and you'll learn a lot from it. And so, that, and, I do corporate coaching and individual coaching and everything. It's something in addition to the broadcasting that I love to do. And I love hosting travel around the world as well, to use coaching in the environment of playing on an unbelievable series of golf courses around the world. So, we're quite busy at the moment.
Good. Gary, thanks a million. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Carl. Always a pleasure, mate.
Mind Caddie.